Hello there everyone, you've tuned in uxwbill. In today's video we're going to be taking a long-term look at some 9-volt alkaline batteries from the PKCell brand. Now, it doesn't take a great deal of imagination to figure out that these batteries were manufactured in China and that they are also quite inexpensive. This box of 20 batteries cost me just a hair over $20 for the entire set on eBay, and that included the shipping. Now, in theory at least, it seems like these might have the potential to be good batteries if you find yourself doing as I do and replacing a lot of them in smoke detectors every year. But I'm also curious about how well they would hold up not only in that application, but also other applications where battery drain might be significantly higher, such as these two multimeters. And so it is that this video is going to try and answer that question in the most direct way that I happen to be aware of, which is to say that I'm going to install the batteries in various devices, including several smoke detectors. As previously mentioned, I have quite a few of them, and then we're just going to see how they last. Of course, the first thing that we should ascertain is just how strong are these batteries out of the box. A good 9-volt battery should measure just a touch over 9 volts at the terminals when you take it out of the package and hook it up to a meter. See if I can get this package of batteries open so that I can prove that to you, which of course is never particularly easy to do on camera, but with a little persistence I managed to get through. Most of these are previously used batteries and thoroughly used up at that, but this one is just a couple of months old. And again, this is another no-name battery that came from the Harbor Freight Tools store. I decided to try these out, see how well they worked, how long they lasted. I wouldn't really be surprised to find out that they were manufactured by the same company that made these PKCell brand batteries, because the design is almost identical between them. Of course, a lot of Chinese manufacturers like to clone each other's products, or if you're not feeling particularly charitable, rip them off from one another. We'll take this inexpensive multimeter, set it to the DC volts range. We'll put our terminals on this battery, and as you can see, we have about a 9.6 volt open circuit voltage available. This is a very strong 9 volt battery. Of course, 9 volt batteries, even at the best of time, do not have a particularly high capability to tolerate discharges. They like a soft, gentle load, which is why they last so long in things like smoke detectors, well-designed things like that Sears multimeter, and similar circuits that just don't draw a whole lot of power over time. So let me unwrap one of these batteries and we'll see how it compares. Here's one of the PKCell branded batteries hooked up to the same inexpensive multimeter. And although the reading is slightly lower than that of the Thunderbolt Magnum battery we saw previously, this is still an exceptionally strong battery that is ready to go into service. So, let's put them in service. And here's a handy smoke alarm right now. In fact, it's very handy because I've actually let the battery go a little bit longer than I should have between changes. Oh sure, sometimes you can get more than a year out of these, but for something fairly safety critical such as this, it really doesn't pay to take excessive chances. I'm just waiting for that meter to fall down from there and smart me right on the head. Well, let's go ahead and see what kind of shape the battery that's in there right now happens to be in under load. And the answer is it's pretty darn weak. So we definitely need to replace this battery with a new one. Get the multimeter out of the way. That was a pretty good save. We'll take the old battery out and we'll get one of these new ones and put in there. Headphone users, beware the beep. Okay, so now we have a new battery in there. Let's just go ahead and put the date on it. 8/9 of 2017. And yes, for those of you in the viewing audience who happen to be wondering, I am one of the few, the proud, the left-handed. Now this is certainly something I have to admit to finding quite interesting. These are both Rayovac batteries that came from the same package. They were installed at the same time and they've been in the same place, separated only by about 20 feet from one another. So there's been no significant difference in temperature or anything like that. And when I've gone around and tested the smoke alarms, I have tested them all equally. And yet you'll find that this second battery is in much better shape. And yes, I measured its voltage under load as well, and it remained about the same. It's certainly still weak, but it is definitely in better shape than its sibling. Must just be normal manufacturing variance, I suppose. Now, for any experiment to be valid, of course, you also have to have a control setup. And so here it is that I have a name brand and also American-made 9-volt battery. And that's not as easy to come by as you might think, because most of the 9-volt batteries, even sold by companies established and owned here in the United States, are no longer manufactured here. In fact, Energizer, the sister brand to Eveready, doesn't manufacture their 9-volt battery here in the United States, at least not totally. I think the package on those says that you will find it's made anywhere in Malaysia, China, or the United States, and I haven't, of course, come across one that's been made in the United States, which is kind of ironic in a sense, because those actually cost more than the Eveready brand in most stores that I frequent. So this is the control battery, this is the name brand, the benchmark by which all of the others, these little PK cells, will be measured. And we'll just see how they do. So here we are, thanks to the magic of video editing, about a year, or if you want to be exact, a year and a week later, but who's honestly counting? Even without the magic of video editing, it certainly goes fast enough. And now it's time to see just how well we did. I have 2 variable batteries at the least, and the 1 control battery that I put in another smoke detector. You probably remember from earlier in the video when I tested the previous batteries in these smoke detectors that there was about a volt's worth of difference between the 2 of them, even though they're separated by no more than 15 to 20 foot worth of room. So let's see how these did and what their open circuit voltage looks like according to this handy-dandy cheap multimeter. Do the first one. And initial impressions, at least, are very positive. That's certainly in much better shape than the Rayovac battery was after a year or so of service, a year and several months. So we'll try the other one. And they are within a fraction of a volt of one another. So there is no odd discrepancy. I'm very pleased with the performance from these batteries. They seem to be excellent value for money. But let's go take a look at our control battery and see how it did. Now, our control battery has unavoidably served in a hotter portion of this building, and the temperature may certainly have influenced its state of charge as well as its lifetime. But let's go ahead and pop it out of the smoke detector and just see what it looks like and how it compares. And the answer is that while it is fractionally weaker than the PKCell batteries, it's certainly not enough to make any significant difference. Now granted, these are open circuit or at least very high resistance voltage tests, and the facts may be a little bit different under load, but I doubt it's enough to matter. And here's another one of the PKCell batteries, the third of many. This one was actually situated in the hottest part of this building by far and away, and I'm actually testing it under a working load right now. But as I projected, it does not seem to have made any significant difference. After all, the load presented by a smoke detector is very small. Even when the beeper goes off, the battery voltage does not change very much. Headphone users, you may want to adjust your volume rather suddenly downward. And finally, to wrap up our tests, here's a brand new example of the PKCell battery. Only instead of being stored in a cool, dry place like they say you're supposed to, this one's actually been in a hot and humid pickup truck cab over pretty much all of the last year. So let's see how it has managed to do. And the answer is it's still in excellent shape. So to make a long story at least a tiny little bit shorter, I like these batteries. I'd certainly buy them again, but I will qualify that with a few closing remarks before we wrap this up. I don't think that these batteries make a good choice if you're going to use them in a high drain application. I installed one of them in a digital micron gauge and it was dead within the week with only minimal use, and I certainly did not forget and leave the thing turned on. Likewise, I also stuck one in a Sony Dream Machine clock radio for its battery backup, where a Duracell Quantum battery had been in place. The Quantum battery still had a very high terminal voltage and was probably perfectly fine, probably should have been left in place. But I decided to go ahead and replace it anyway. For the year or so that Quantum battery had been in service, the time had slipped on that clock radio by only about a minute or so during an hour's worth of accumulated power outages, roughly speaking. The PKCell battery did not perform nearly as well. The time drifted considerably further throughout the same approximate number of power outages. So if you have a high drain application, these may not be a good choice, even though they are claimed to be an ultra-alkaline battery. There's also the 800-pound gorilla in the room that's a problem with any battery you might buy. This is the battery from the micron gauge, and if you look at it, you'll see right away that the topmost portion of the outer wrapping is actually discolored. That's right, this battery leaked, and it did so not long after it was completely run down. There's also been some damage from corrosion inside the negative battery terminal. So don't use these in an application where leakage might be a problem. Even though the damage seems to have largely been contained to the battery's outer wrapping, I don't think that's the way to bet as far as the safety of your battery-operated equipment is concerned. So again, I recommend these. I would certainly buy them again for various applications, just not every application for which you might use a 9-volt battery. And as always, I want to thank you for watching, and I look forward to hearing your constructive commentary down in the comments area. Just a quick little postscript. This is what the battery casing looks like after the outer label has been removed. This is the battery that was previously indicated as having leaked, and I think you can see where it's done so. It actually looks like the casing would, assuming it's a solid piece, which I rather doubt. I think this bottom panel is probably a separate portion. Do a pretty good job of containing a leak, but again, that's really not the way to bet. And don't try this at home, especially what I'm about to do next. Nor at a friend's house, nor at work, nor anywhere else that you can think of. Here's a look at the depleted and leaky, now dismantled PKCell 9-volt battery. They based their battery on a set of quadruple A cells wired in series to reach the desired 9-volt output figure. And I'm also quite pleased to see that the outer casing does actually appear to be molded as one piece rather than having a separate pad for the bottom portion. So perhaps the ability of this enclosure to contain a leak is much better than I was giving it credit for. Speaking of the leak, these are the two batteries that appear to have actually done the majority of the leaking. The other 4 cells are in good condition still.